Welcome to the Least Haunted Podcast. Here comes the theme song.
Hello, dig for bones.
I don't think anyone knows that I'm the one cut off your toes and put them in the drawer with the sock.
Hello and welcome to the Least Haunted Podcast, a place where science, skepticism, humor, and anthropology meet to discuss all things spooky, haunting, supernatural, and sometimes just the plain ridiculous. I'm your host, Cody Franks, and joining me as almost always is standing stalwart and strong, sage-like and salacious, silly and steadfast, stupendous and serene, studious, stoic, and salubrious.
Garth. I am so stoic. Hi, everybody.
In this heat?
In this heat? Yeah, I've been just, in this heat. Anyway, it is hot. It is a hot October night for Cody and Garth. Welcome, everybody, to the Least Haunted Podcast.
Night? It's like...
In people's brains, this could be night.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
actually daytime.
That's a good question. When do people assume that, like, when they hear, if they picture us talking in a room, in their little mental image,
they're probably imagining it's nighttime because it's the Least Haunted Podcast. We're talking about spooky things.
But it's also least haunted, so it could be in the daytime.
Oh.
We're shedding the light on.
Let us know.
Yeah.
In whatever way you can comment. How do you picture where Cody and I are?
Yeah.
Are we in armchairs by a fire? Reading from tomes? Are we a little?
You know, what'd be great is join our Discord.
Yeah.
We have an episode topic thread where you can like discuss your theories about what our recording setup looks like. What's the HQ's like?
That's actually what I'd like everybody to let us know.
Better yet, we have a fan art section that hasn't gotten any action in a while. Do a drawing.
Yeah, draw me and Cody. And if you don't know what we look like, that's okay. Just make it up. It'll be great.
Yeah. I mean, there's YouTube videos, but
yeah, there are. But we don't expect you to
so
do research.
So that would be on our Discord, which is
check
also
out our Discord,
where the Garth's moniker came from this time. Again, that was Ken with an assist from New Jared, and then I think another assist by Barbarian.
Thank you all. That was wonderful. Always a welcome. I feel welcomed into my own podcast whenever I hear all of those words about me.
And then, of course, we have Patreon. Go to patreon.com/leasthaunted, and you can support us in various ways.
You can listen to our other show, Polterbites, which is Cody and I just chatting about stuff. We just recorded one right now.
Yeah, a little behind the scenes.
To warm up for this one, because I need some warming up.
It's not hot enough already.
It's not hot enough. I had to do some jumping jacks. All right, I'm ready. I'm ready for a show, Cody. I'm ready. Let's
All
do
right,
it.
Garth, are you ready to talk about Stonehenge?
I am so ready to talk about Stonehenge. I don't know much about Stonehenge.
Oh, well, that...
Other than the Spinal Tap song. And then I heard recently that it wasn't really the Druids that built Stonehenge. It was somebody before, so I don't know what I know.
But true to the song, no one knows what they were doing. That is actually more accurate than you think.
No one knows who they were or what they were doing.
Okay, so let's describe it a little bit. What's your mental image? Like when you
So
think
there's
of
it's a couple of concentric circles of rocks up on a grassy hillside in England, and the rocks in the middle are the tallest. I think they're like, I don't know, like 20 feet tall or something.
Yeah.
And
sometimes more.
Yeah, and so they go in shapes where there's two vertical ones and then one crossing on top, making kind of a table shape, you might say,
Or a doorway.
or a doorway. Yeah, that'd probably be better.
That top part has a name. It's called a lintel.
Yeah, so there's two verticals and one lintel. And then there's several of those, and they kind of go around in a little circle. And then there's another circle of smaller rocks further out that go all the way around. But it's been around for thousands of years and has fallen into disrepair. So it's not the full thing anymore. There's a lot missing.
Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah, thank you.
It's a pretty good description. It is, and it's in Wiltshire area of southwest England.
I believe it's right by like a highway. Like you can drive past
Yes,
it.
yeah, it's like the A303 or the A334. I don't know. British people, you can correct me on that. I didn't bother. I read it several times in my research. I just didn't really, stick it in there. But yeah, there's a highway that's right next to it. It's also a military base in that area. It's on this. It's the Salisbury Plain. Nothing to do.
That
with
where they make the steaks?
Nothing to do with
No.
the steaks.
Okay.
Unless you count like cattle raising, in which case they're raising the steaks. So maybe
that counts. That counts. So are there cows walking around Stonehenge?
not anymore.
Oh, okay. There used to be.
For a time, yeah.
Wow.
As we're going to find out, so Stonehenge been around very long time, and in that time, it has played many roles.
Okay.
And so that's what makes the whole story so confusing to figure out. A lot of myths and stories about it that are not true. We'll get into all that too. First, let's clarify that the British Isles and indeed Western Europe are covered in countless megalithic structures and huge monuments and earthworks that date from the same time as Stonehenge.
Oh, okay. Are they all henges?
No.
Okay.
We'll get into what a henge is.
Yeah, I don't know what a
Yeah.
henge is.
This area around Stonehenge and the Salisbury Plain is one of the largest concentrations of so many of these in one area.
Oh, okay. So there's other old structures right around Stonehenge.
Yeah. In fact, Stonehenge itself is just one part of what they call a sacred landscape. And so there is within just a few mile radius, there's over 70 archaeological sites of
Wow.
historical significance dating to the time of Stonehenge and even after Stonehenge and even before Stonehenge.
Wow.
There's one site that is like a precursor that is probably 1,000 years or so older than even Stonehenge, the earliest stages of Stonehenge. So yeah, this whole area has been inhabited for a very long time. This is what we call the Neolithic.
I've heard of
New
that.
Stone Age. So
There's the lithic, then there's the Neolithic.
well, the Paleolithic, that would be Homo habilis and our human ancestors. That's
when everyone was on the paleo
when they
diet.
yeah, exactly. It's actually why it's called the paleo diet. But it's when they first started making stone tools.
Oh, okay.
So it's the old Stone Age, Paleo, old Lithic. And then you enter the new Neolithic, which is we're modern humans
they used
now.
new stones during
Yeah,
the
it's
Neolithic.
modern humans, and we are using stone tools, and it's also agriculture is starting to develop,
They use blue stones for Stonehenge.
amongst others.
Okay. I saw that in my research for Garth's Corner.
So it isn't necessarily unique in general, but it's unique in scale, lasting impact, and a few details about it stand out.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of old structures, but Stonehenge, in popular cultures, everybody knows Stonehenge.
Yeah. Okay, so it was built in phases.
Okay.
So we're going to start at the earliest phase, and to keep this simple and help streamline it, I'm going to break it down into 3.5 phases. There's
Okay.
actually more than that. And we're going to name these phases after the phases of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, just to kind of help. Yeah. So phase 1, assemble. 3100 BCE. This is about 5,000 years before present.
Okay.
A circular ditch is dug into the chalk of Salisbury Plain. So Salisbury Plain, geologically, there are some hills on the edge of it, but for the most part, even the hills and the plain are composed of chalk. And I mean chalk like you think of white chalk.
Like
right?
white chalk.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's the remains of, billions or millions of years ago.
Is that where chalk comes from? From plains of chalk? I never thought
So
about
chalk is compressed diatoms. They're fossils. It's tiny fossils of ancient sea life.
Really?
So phytoplankton, when it dies and it sinks down to the floor of the ocean, those layers would pile up.
Yeah.
And then that would get covered over, and those seas might dry up, and then and it gets compressed, and over billions of years, it turns into chalk or limestone.
And then that's where every stick of chalk you've ever held, that's made of.
So you can get
ancient
chalk.
plankton?
Yeah, so chalk,
Wow.
limestone, and I think flint are all three of the same origin. They're just different forms.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you have the chalk, and that is what this area is made of. So 3100 BC, a large circular ditch is dug into the chalk. They dig a ditch, and then they pile up the chalk on either side to make a berm,
Okay.
almost like a moat kind of structure.
Yeah.
This is the henge.
Oh, that's
So-
all it takes to be a henge?
So when archaeologists talk about henge, they are talking about circular earthworks, these ditches that have been dug in the Neolithic. However, this is where it gets kind of confusing because they get their name from Stonehenge,
Right. Oh. Oh,
Right.
okay, got it.
but
so it was called Stonehenge before they defined the word henge as being that.
yeah,
Okay,
as near as I
see.
could figure out. And
That is very confusing.
yeah, and the word henge itself is of dubious etymology, like word origins. There's like a debate on that. So one idea is that in a 10th century glossary, the name is given as henge cliff, and a henge cliff means like a precipice.
Okay.
So the idea was that like these are artificial cliffs made out of stone.
Little cliffs.
Little cliffs,
Okay.
yeah. But then that also might not be correct, and that the idea henge is related to hinge, which also means to hang. Comes from to hang. And it's like, oh, that they took stones and they hanged the stones up in the air on each other. So it's a stone hanging.
Okay. I
right?
see.
Like they're making stone gallows. But yeah, now henges are the thing is, we don't know what they called it at the time it was built.
Yeah,
And we never
naturally.
will.
Yeah.
Spoiler. We're never going to know
Ah.
what they called it because there was no writing at the time. So it gets its name from people who came long after.
Mm-hmm.
And now when we talk about henges, we mean a ditch. So
Okay.
it's like a kind of a misnomer, but it's not, because it's like a snake eating its own tail.
Well, it sounds like they
Like
came up with the
name-wise.
name Stonehenge and then later on decided what it meant and applied it to other things.
Yeah.
So it's like,
And of course,
yeah.
this one is special because this is the henge that has the stones in it.
Yeah, other henges are maybe wood henge.
There is a
or
wood henge,
not a
and
henge.
not too far from here.
Oh, okay.
And we'll get to that. That's way down the line.
Okay.
Okay, so
That's
this-
in part 3,
Yeah.
Endgame, or
So-
whatever.
so they dig this circular ditch. They line the bottom of it with bones of various animals:
Okay.
deer, pigs, and aurochs, which is the precursor to modern domestic cattle.
Oh, okay.
And we think that these aurochs,
Aurochs.
and from dating, they know that the auroch skulls that are put in bones that are put in this ditch predate the other animal bones by about 1,000 years.
Wow.
So somebody kept these skulls for a very long
For
time.
a while it was Skullhenge.
Before they, yeah. So, and there's evidence that that nearby site I mentioned that is 1,000 years older, they might have been worshiping aurochs at the site.
Wow.
And so this is like a continuation maybe of a culture that was already there, and now they just progressed into the next stage. Inside of the henge, there's 56 circular pits. Each one is about 1 meter in diameter. That's 3.3 feet. And although the pits are now filled in, archaeological evidence has revealed a few interesting things about these circular pits. The idea is maybe they had wood in them, like a wood henge.
Oh, okay.
But there is actually no evidence of wood in there. So it's like if it was left there to rot,
It'd be long gone by now.
but there'd still be chemical evidence, which is how we know
Oh.
that the other wood henge had wood posts
So if
in
it did have wood, they took the wood out.
Yes.
It didn't
right, which
rot
is-
in
yeah.
place. Okay.
But most likely it had stones in it. So there's this guy, John Aubrey, in the 1600s. He's a British antiquarian and natural philosopher. He's interested in megalithic sites in southern England. And he identifies 5 of these holes. But at the time, there wasn't like archaeology. You were an antiquarian, so you just went and looked at things and then just inferred shit from what was present. Nobody was digging.
Antiquing.
Yeah, they weren't digging, which is crazy. So he found 5 impressions, didn't bother to dig into them, but he noted them. And so because of that, they're called Aubrey pits. Later, in the 1920s, British archaeologist Colonel William Hawley, he examined these pits more closely, and then he finds out that there's more of them.
Ah.
And he's the first person who's like, hey, why don't we dig into these pits and see what's in there?
And thus archaeology was born. We're going to start digging.
Yeah, and so he digs into them, and what he finds, can you guess like what they find inside these stone pits?
Well, dirt, because it was filled
Yeah.
in.
In with the dirt.
It sounds like there were bones already, so maybe skulls of animals and stuff.
Human cremains, cremated bones.
Oh, like the ash from the burned bones.
Yes.
Whoa.
And the bone particles. But in being the 1920s,
How could they tell it was human? I mean, it was
because there
old.
were some bones that didn't burn up.
okay.
There's some teeth and ear bones. Apparently,
ears don't have bones.
there's bones inside your ear, your eardrum. is a
Oh.
bone structure, and it's in there. And those are really dense and small, and so they don't really break up in like the cremation process. In modern cremation, there's stuff left over after they burn it, and
Oh,
they
yeah.
throw it into a big grinder and it gets pulverized, right? So the idea that you burn a body and suddenly it's gone is like, no, you have to get that fire really, really hot for really, really long. But anyway, you got these cremains. But being the 1920s, they didn't have any way to analyze them any further. And so they put all the cremains together, and he reburies them under a plaque in hole 39, because they numbered them. There's 56 of these holes.
Oh, okay.
And he puts in 39 with a little plaque over it, buries it, and that's in 1935. And there they stay until 2013, when the cremains were dug up for modern testing, because now we have DNA testing and all kinds of shit we can do with this.
Very nice. So he buried them thinking maybe in the future people will be able to
I
look
pretty
into
much,
this
I think
further.
so. He put a
That's
plaque and
very
said, hey,
forward
these are the
thinking.
things I found. Although
Nice.
the archaeologists who later dug it up were kind of like, man, if he had really,
If he
like,
left him in the holes,
they'd have more, they'd
then
more
they know
context.
what was where.
Because we know which was where, but also he could have like preserved them better by putting them in like a box or something for us, because he just threw it back in with the dirt and then put this like lead plaque on it and buried it, and so they like degraded more. But they had over 50,000 bone fragments,
Wow.
and they figured out that this accounts to 63 separate individuals.
Uh-huh.
There's almost an equal distribution of men and women and even some children, but gender
Interesting.
is like equally distributed.
Okay. Okay.
They did strontium testing to see like what minerals were in there, and they found that these people did not come from Salisbury. They're not from that area.
No kidding.
They're actually from modern day Wales,
Oh,
which is interesting for a few reasons.
Sort of like a pilgrimage thing going on, maybe.
Yeah, so you mentioned bluestones.
Yes.
Okay, so this is still, now we're going back phase 1 of
Yes.
Stonehenge.
Yeah.
They dig the ditch. They dig the pits. What goes into the pits? The bluestones.
That's where the bluestones go. And
Yes.
the bluestones were not around there. They're from another part of England,
Yes.
I believe.
So when they dug into these pits, they found that the chalk had been compressed by some kind of great weight. And that's how they were able to figure out that it was the bluestones. And also that the pits happen to be the same size as all the bluestones, which is a pretty, coincidental thing. And so today there's only 43 of the bluestones left. And each one weighs about 2 to 5 tons.
It's funny that any of the, I mean, I know it's been around a long time, but like the fact that like a lot of these rocks have gone missing, it's like, boy, that took a lot of
Yes.
time. You can't just like sneak up in the middle of the night and just quickly steal a stone. It's tons.
So there were 56 once, and now there's only 43. And they're actually not in those holes anymore. The bluestones were in a later phase, we'll discover, were moved inside the stone circle, which still
Oh,
exists.
okay.
They repurposed them. Anyway, they were able to figure out exactly where these came from.
Wow.
They were quarried in the Preseli Hills in western Wales, which means that these bluestones and the people whose cremated remains were buried under them had traveled over 180 miles or 289 kilometers. Each one of these stones weighing between 2 and 5 tons at a time when they didn't have the wheel.
Log rolling, right?
And
Got to be logs.
outside
Like,
of the Salisbury Plain at
Yeah.
that time, as we talked about in our Alien Big Cats, England was heavily forested. So you have to get these
This
through-
isn't a making the pyramid thing where you have nice smooth
You're quarrying
sand
it
and
right
you're
there.
and you're pouring water on it to
Yeah.
make it slick. No,
Yeah.
you're pulling these through forest.
And up and over
Wow.
hills
Oh my gosh.
without wheels. Yeah, so that's one of the mysteries of Stonehenge, is exactly
How the
how
heck
they
did they
pulled this
drag
off.
that? Wow.
And then here's where it gets even weirder. The cremated individuals weren't all placed in there at one time. They like range for it's almost like a 200 period of time when they were being interred.
It sounds kind of like maybe it's human sacrifices or something, and every year another person goes in.
I
don't
had this
know.
idea that was like, oh, maybe, because we don't know if the stones all arrived at one time,
Right.
right? So it might have been like, yeah, you are the chosen one. You accompany the stone. They sacrifice
And
you.
once the stone gets there, you go in with the stone.
Right, as a grave marker, because you're an important person for some reason.
Could be.
We don't know. And also, because of the cremation process, actually, we can't get DNA out of these. So we don't know if there's a familial relationship. We don't know if this is like a dynasty. Are these people relatives? Is it like a caste of people born into like you're the chosen ones because you are of this lineage? We can't say. Oh, and another thing about these bluestones, though.
Uh-huh.
There's another bluestone at the site that's larger than all the others. And this one is located inside of a later phase. The odd thing about it is it did not come from Wales where the other bluestones came from.
Okay.
Care to guess where it did come from?
No, I can't even care to guess. The quarry? The quarrymen. The
Northeast Scotland and possibly even the
What?
Orkney Islands.
That's so far.
And it weighs like 10 tons.
Well, it couldn't come from. How would you carry that on a boat? From an island?
Big boats?
Oh my gosh.
Well, actually, we're going to find out that one of the theories about how they got the bluestones from Wales is that they floated them on rafts down various rivers, and then they could go different rivers, and then they only had to move them overland between the rivers. And then once they got to the River Avon runs right next to Stonehenge.
Okay.
Kind of like how they moved the granite blocks for the pyramids.
Right.
Like water.
If you can get it onto a river, that's a lot easier.
And yeah, and England has a lot more rivers than, say, Egypt.
Uh-huh.
And also, this is about the time when, when they're doing this, when phase 1 is happening, the Great Pyramids of Egypt haven't even been, they're still 1,000 years away. Like when we did the pyramid episode and we talked about that first step pyramid,
Yeah.
that's still 1,000 years away from phase 1
Okay.
of Stonehenge. And that one bluestone, it came from the Orkney Islands. So that's 400 miles away or 644 kilometers away. And also, I forgot, they couldn't even work metal because this is still the
Stone
Neolithic.
Age, yeah.
It's still the Stone Age.
Wow.
And that's only phase 1.
That was phase 1, everybody.
Phase 2, Age of Ultron?
I was wondering where you're going to go with that. All right.
Now we're at 2900 BCE.
Okay.
So around this time, there's more cremation burials that are occurring, but this time they're putting them inside the ditch. The ditch is silted in a little bit. It has buried those animal bones, and so now there's a new layer, which they are then adding human cremated remains to. They also lowered the berm around the ditch.
I was thinking, sooner or later they will fill this ditch up all the way,
Yeah, it's starting
right?
to sink in.
Yeah.
There's some sort of structure made out of wooden posts that's made inside the circle of bluestones. Because those we find the chemical traces. There's some big post holes. There's an idea that maybe even something like a totem pole is what we would think of, like some kind of huge effigy, because they did find I think it's like a 46-foot long wooden post in the River Thames that dates from around this period that was carved into like an effigy of some sort.
Oh, okay.
So we know that they were doing that. So,
would those totem poles be where the bluestones currently are now on the inside circle?
Maybe.
Or out where they used to be way around on the outside?
They're like inside the circle.
Toward the center.
Yeah, towards the center.
Okay, got it.
And then that's just like all they kind of do for phase 2 is they add that, they change the ditch a bit, and then we get to phase 3.
Phase 3.
Infinity War. 300 years later than that, 2600 BCE. So the ditch didn't always connect. It has a little opening at one end. So it's more like a horseshoe that meets really close in, but circular.
Right.
So it's not a complete circle.
Yeah, so you can walk in.
Yeah.
Well, you could walk in through anywhere because there's big gaps, but
so
it's
that
not a
ditch
perfect
never
circle.
was never a perfect circle. But in phase 3, the beginning of phase 3, they widened that opening. So now it more accurately lines up with the midsummer sunrise and the midwinter sunsets of that period.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Then there's this thing called the heel stone, which is a large piece of sarsen stone. Sarsen stone, which is what the rest of the stones in the next phase are all made out of, is a very, very hard sandstone that's harder than granite.
Wow. That's the heel stone.
Yeah, they put a big one of those outside of the gateway, but in line with it. So if you stood in the center and you looked out through the gateway, the heel stone would line up with the sun at certain times of the year. Now, I don't know if this is too early to get into Garth's Corner.
This is Garth's. Welcome to Garth's Corner,
or should
everybody.
we get to the next phase where they add the rest of the stones to get?
No, Garth's Corner is just about this.
Okay.
Welcome to Garth's Corner.
I am an old heel stone, made out of silicified sandstone. I sit outside of Stonehenge and I wander alone. Montgomery's Angel and Bonnie Raitt's Solstice, ain't enough to help me understand why I'm prone. Bake me a maple cake that is ugly for a comedy roaster and mix it with pig bones. Why do the Stonehenges wonder what they're for? Our purpose changes and history's flown. And in Garth's corn, no.
All right. So anyway, yeah, this is a very, very short Garth's Corner. There's a lot of theories about astronomy and Stonehenge, and not a whole lot that's for sure certain. So I will just say what we do know for sure
Okay.
is that if you stand at the summer solstice, which would be June 21st, sometimes 22nd or 20th, but it's always around then, and you stand at the back of the at the midpoint of the horseshoe, opposite that gap of the entrance, and you look.
For real quick, the horseshoe comes in the next phase. We're not to the horseshoe.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Sorry.
That's why I was like, I don't know if it's too early.
Yeah, if you stand beyond that and look through the gaps in the stones at the heel stone, and you line up your eyes so that the heel stone, way off in the distance, there is right there in that gap.
Yeah.
At the sunrise will rise right over the heel stone.
Okay.
And throughout the year, the sun rises in different places because the sun goes
precession.
higher in the sky in the summer and lower in the sky in the winter. And that extreme is more obvious the further north you go. And this is a ways enough north. So the sun will rise at that point on the horizon right there during the summer solstice.
And that's actually lined up with, it's actually northeast, more northeast than... because that's the time of the year that line.
The sun rises in the east, but not always due east.
Yeah, it depends.
Exactly. So
Unless you're at the equator, maybe.
Yeah. So if you're at the equator during the summer solstice,
Nothing really changes for you, right?
it just rises due east, or the winter solstice for that matter.
Yeah.
And then at the equinoxes, it might be kind of to one side or the other. But that is a for sure thing about Stonehenge that is so specific it couldn't be a coincidence. There are other things that are possibly coincidences. You mentioned that there were 52 of those little stones.
56.
56. So you divide that by 3, and I think it's 18.
You divide it by 2, you get the 28-day lunar cycle, don't you?
Well, if you divide it by 3, you get 18, and eclipses come in batches that happen every 18 years.
Okay.
Because that's when the plane that the moon sits on as it orbits the Earth lines up with the plane of the sun and the Earth.
Okay.
So when those two happen, you get the moon going in front of the sun a lot more frequently. And that happens every 18. So there's a theory that maybe those stones were set up in such a way as to predict eclipses, but not a lot of evidence for it. It could be a coincidence. And there are several other things that are sort of related. I mean, people have looked at the layout of Stonehenge a million different ways to try to infer numbers and stuff. And the rest of them are, there's some evidence, but not very conclusive. But what we do know is the heel stone. And yes, so that does line up very well. This has been Garth's Corner.
Okay, phase 3. The heel stone is added. The heel stone actually used to have a few other stones with it. It wasn't by itself. There might have been 2 others, but they sank into the chalk.
Oh, wow.
And we'll explain later, some of the stones, where'd all the stones go? Some didn't go anywhere.
They sank?
Some did.
I guess, you're talking about long periods of time, I guess. Sometimes it swallows things up.
And there's a very surprising person who was bothered by this question, and I'm saving that for the end.
Okay.
Another thing that was added was a processional avenue lined by 2 ditches that runs 2 miles between Stonehenge and the River Avon.
Wow. So people go from the river to Stonehenge.
Yeah. So
nice
they're actually, if you look at the area of Stonehenge with ground penetrating radar or from the air, you will see these ditches that were dug, as well as the henge, but that gate that opens up and that lines up with the heel stone, there is a pre-existing geological feature there that is it appears to be 2 ditches that create like an avenue that are like cracks in the earth that are caused during the Ice Age from like ground shrinking and freezing, and it caused this natural that happened to already line up with the solstice.
Oh,
So that might have actually
that's
been,
why they picked the site.
that might be why they picked the site.
Yeah, somebody noticed.
Yes.
Oh, look at these lines that formed in the earth,
yeah.
line
And then,
right up with the sun at the solstice. That's cool.
Yeah.
Wow.
Then in phase 3, they extend these ditches and create what is now called the Stonehenge Causeway.
Mm-hmm.
Phase 3, part 2, Endgame. This is the phase where Stonehenge takes on its most recognizable form. So at a quarry 16 miles away, sarsen stone, which I already told you is this incredibly hard sandstone, is being quarried. And 30 of these stones are cut. Each stone is about 13.5 feet or 4.11 meters high, 7 feet or 2 meters wide, and 3.5 feet or 1.6 meters deep. And each one weighs 26 tons.
Are they carved to be that shape? Because they are all sort of shaped like bricks.
They are worked.
Wow.
But here's the thing: is one side is finished finer than the other. So the inside faces are more finished, and the outside looks more weathered. And when you go inside, the inside is more like shaped up.
Could that just be the weather affecting it?
Maybe that they're protected from each other.
Yeah.
That could be. But the other thing that they're doing is at the top, they're carving them down and leaving like little pegs, little round conical pegs that stick out on the top.
Oh.
And this is because they take these stones, they stand them upright, and they space them out in a 98-foot or 30-meter diameter circle.
Wow.
And then they bring 30 lintels.
Oh, the lintels
Are then lifted into place. And the thing is that these lintels have holes carved to meet up with the pegs, like Lego.
Yeah.
And they also, each end of them is carved so that they fit into each other with a tongue and groove.
That's
to
amazing.
lock them into place.
So somebody engineered that, lifted them into place, and it's probably one of the reasons Stonehenge has lasted as long as it has. Is it's not just rocks stacked on top of each other; they're actually carved to fit and lock in.
Yes.
Wow.
Now some of these stones have gone missing. We don't, they
Possibly sunk into the ground.
Yeah, because if you look at it now, it's not a complete circle.
Right. Yeah.
In 2013, there was a really dry year, and circular indentations of parched dead grass showed up, and they were spaced out perfectly to complete the circle.
Wow.
So we now know that there were other stones that are missing that complete the circle.
And even these thousands of years later, the ground is still different.
Yeah, the ground is still different there.
Yeah.
It remembers.
Wow.
Also around this time, the 56 blue stones are moved inside of this circle of the sarsen stones. And then here come the trilithons.
The trilithons?
Yes. So within this circle of sarsen stones, you have 5 trilithons. And a trilithon is simply 3 stones. So it's 2 uprights and 1 lintel on them. This is that horseshoe shape. Yeah. Right?
Or it's the stacked. I said it was like a table before.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the iconic. Well, in Spinal Tap, when they made the thing, it was
that would be
the 2 verticals and the 1 horizontal on top. Yeah.
So these trilithons are brought in, and they're arranged in a horseshoe shape. So it's 5 of them. So you have like, and they mirror each other.
Okay.
They get taller as they work inward.
Okay.
So you have like 2 that are equal height, and then in from there you have 2 more that are taller but equal to each other, and then you have 1 massive one in the middle.
Oh, okay.
That completes like the bottom of the horseshoe. And so this horseshoe shape is 45 feet across, 13 meters across, and each of these trilithons they can weigh up to 50 tons.
Jeez.
And they are also carved and joined together just like the other smaller sarsen stones. The smallest pair of them is 20 feet tall, 6 meters. The next one are 24. And then the great trilithon at the end is 22 feet or 6.7 meters.
Wow.
And they estimate that a further 7.9 feet or 2 meters of it is below ground. It's sank into the chalk.
Oh, wow.
So it was even taller.
Yeah. And another reason that it stays upright and doesn't fall over, a lot of it is underground.
Yes. Now, around this time, though, the people from Wales are no longer the only people who are participating in this the remains we're finding are now local. Like they're Salisbury people, but also you get an influx of people from continental Europe.
Ah.
And they're bringing metal with them.
Oh.
So the
okay.
Beaker people arrive.
The Beaker people.
They're called that because they made these ceramic cups that are beaker shaped.
Oh,
They're
okay.
the Beaker people.
Right on.
Sometimes the Bell Beaker people.
Meep, 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 meep.
Yeah. So there's a nearby to Stonehenge. There is a body that's found, a skeleton of a young man in his mid-30s. They call him
the Beaker man.
No, he's the because there's like he's one of the archers. They found 3 who they call archers because they seem to have a ceremonial wrist guard, which you would have if you were an archer.
Sure, yeah.
But the thing with this guy is that he is buried with gold, a copper dagger, or a bronze dagger.
Mm-hmm.
And they did the strontium testing. He comes from Germany.
Wow. And what era would he have been alive?
This is around 2600 BCE.
Wow. People were coming all the way from there to there.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, start having people that are coming from elsewhere, and so like the purpose might have been shifted. You know, originally it might have been, hey, here's the people who are like our specials that we're sending as a sacrifice to this place, or maybe it was the idea that like that was where the ancestors came from. I don't know, but then you get this extra phase where now like the stones are more complex.
Yeah.
They're getting rearranged, and the people who are doing it are like different people.
Wow.
So another sign that you have new people coming into the area is that around this time, into a few of the trilithons, people carved the shape of bronze axe heads.
Oh, yeah. I never thought about the fact that people might be like carving into these.
Yeah.
That would be very natural. To either graffiti them or put effigies or draw stuff in them.
Yeah, and they know that this is done at a later time because the style of the axe head is reflected art style. Like they know, like, oh, we don't find those axe heads dug up until this point. Also, the people who were building this didn't have metal, so they probably didn't have these axes. And then somebody else came in after, repurposed the site, added another touch of their own to it.
Wow.
And carved these things into it.
That is something.
And so for the next 800 years, Stonehenge would receive very small minor adjustments and additions. The last addition was made in around 1600 BCE.
Its civilizations come and go, and they each inherit the Stonehenge.
Yeah. And then they tweak it and reapply, like, you know, they put some new spin on it
Sure.
and repurpose it.
Wow.
But
so
after,
they had their own theories about where it came
Yes.
from.
So after 1600 BCE, though, they're not doing anything there.
Okay.
The site is largely, I guess you would say, like abandoned.
Wow.
Or at least they're not making additions to it. The Romans didn't even talk about it. Like Julius Caesar
I would think
invades,
that they would be interested in that because they're all into engineering and stuff.
Yeah. Whether or not they just didn't see it, or I don't know. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break and we're going to dig for some cremains.
Let's dig for some cremains, see if
And
we can carbon date anything.
And when we come back, we're going to get into some myths, some folklore, and then theories.
All right.
Take 5. You sure do listen to a lot of podcasts. I bet you even have a few ideas for a podcast yourself. In fact, you just know someone will want to listen to a show about how every episode of Murder, She Wrote has a thematically corresponding episode of The Love Boat. But how do you go about starting your new podcast, Murder, She Boat? Sequoidea is the answer. Sequoidea Productions is a content creation consultant specializing in podcasts. We have 4 years experience in podcast creation and production, and we can help you every step of the way to getting your show going and growing. From idea to formatting, to recording and editing, etc. Sequoidea can even help you think of a catchy, memorable name. Murder, She Wrote. We can guide you through the entire process of getting your idea out into the ears and eyes of others. Web design, custom logos and art. How about a bespoke theme song? All created by actual certified human beings. No AI involved. As natural as the mighty sequoias themselves. Your idea is a seed. Let Sequoidea help it grow. Sequoidea.com. That's SEQUOIDEA.com.
boy, those were some pulverized cremains, weren't they? I got chalk all over my hands, Cody.
I'm still coughing some up. Don't get too close, man.
Yeah, I really should have worn that my mask for that one.
Like an N95 or something.
N95.
Anyway.
N96.
Myths, folklore, and theories about Stonehenge. So, like I said, nobody's really mentioning it. The Romans don't write about it.
Weird.
The earliest mention of Stonehenge is in AD 1130.
Wow.
Yeah, a very long time after it was.
I mean, for the people who lived in that area before that, is there much writing left to us?
That's a good point.
Right?
And so yeah, this
why
earliest,
would you get
yeah,
anything
the
else?
earliest. But I guess
You'd
my
think
thing is,
travelers would have.
yeah,
written
I
about
would
it.
imagine that the Romans would have, because
Yeah.
they were writing. They were in Britain.
They were occupying like all of Europe or big.
They
sections.
occupied Britain for like a couple hundred years. They were there
There's
for
no
a
way
long
nobody
time.
noticed Stonehenge.
Yeah, but whether or not those writings just don't survive,
Could be.
or maybe I just didn't find them when I was looking. But as far as I found, one of the first mentions is in 1130. This guy Henry of Huntingdon. Of course, these are all monks, right? They're all
Yeah, they're the one that's good. There's the one that they could write.
yeah. So
a lot of people knew how to
Yeah,
write.
exactly. He's writing a history of Anglorum, or it's about the Anglo-Norman invasions, and so he's like writing about that, and he like briefly mentions it, and then after the next one is this guy.
It's kind of like Benefer Anglorum. It's the
Yeah.
English and the what was it?
It was
English.
Anglo-Norman.
Yeah,
Anglorum.
Anglorum. Okay.
And then you got this guy Geoffrey of Monmouth, and he's a Catholic clerk, also writing about this stuff. He's from Wales, but his story, he's writing Historia Regum Britanniae, or the history of the kings of Britain, and he talks about the wizard Merlin.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh, Merlin did the stones.
Yeah, so the idea is-
of course, it was a wizard.
So you have this king Aurelius Ambrosius, and he wants to commemorate this killing of a bunch of his men that were killed by Saxons, and Merlin says, well, like the best way to do that is to go to Ireland and steal one of their stone circles. There's a stone circle in Ireland that you can go steal
it and set it up here.
and bring it here. Kind of sounds kind of suspicious, like go somewhere
sounds
else.
hard.
Well, the stones didn't come from there. This might be some kind of like
Oh.
telephone game met through time.
So this guy's theory about Stonehenge does have some potential fact.
That the stones came from very far away.
So that legend persists in this
Yes.
new thing, but this was Merlin's idea, according to this clerk.
And then
Okay.
depending on the version of the story, either Merlin just uses magic to bring it, or the king sends his good buddy Uther Pendragon, who is King
yeah.
Arthur's dad.
Oh, of course, Uther Pendragon. I remember.
Sends him to go get it with like 15,000 men. And then that's still not working. So then Merlin's like, tell you what, like, I'll make a giant do it. How's that? You know? So that's one.
That would be way easier than
Yeah.
figuring this out yourself, dudes.
Then in the 1600s, one guy's like, well, I think that maybe the Vikings built it as
Oh.
this, you know,
Okay.
to worship their sky god. And then you got that guy I mentioned, John Aubrey, who
Right.
digs who goes and is looking into it.
He's gonna actually start digging.
He doesn't dig.
Oh, he was the
Yeah, he's the one that found the whole.
he was the
Yes.
casual archaeologist.
And he has a follower who comes after him, but like just not very long after. This guy William Stukely, and William Stukely was a friend of Isaac Newton,
Oh, okay.
and was Isaac Newton's biographer.
I didn't think Isaac Newton had any friends.
It's his biographer, and it's where we get the story of the apple falling on his head.
Oh,
It's from this guy.
Okay, got it.
And this guy is like, I think, you know, Aubrey was onto something. I think that these were built by ancient Britons. He's like, this is like, because there's the idea that like somebody else came in and did it. Was like an idea. Was that like, okay, well, either if it wasn't like through magic, they stole it from somebody else, or for a while they even thought maybe the Romans did build it.
Right. So he's the first guy to think, oh, maybe there were people living here before the people
That were
are
capable
living
of
here
this,
now that
who
could
did
have done this.
Yeah, who could have done this.
Uh-huh.
But then his question is, well, who was it?
Right.
And he's one of the first people to say the Druids.
The Druids.
In ancient times, hundreds of years before the dawn of history, lived an ancient race of people, the Druids.
Aubrey was already playing with the idea of druids, but then Stuckley like really doubles down, and basically everything that we have the false conceptions about druids today in popular culture come from this guy who was
really?
just making it up off of wishful thinking. Yeah, he was also like a kind of an early pioneer of when we talked about the picturesque.
Oh yeah.
He describes Stonehenge in these terms where he says like, no, this is like the sublimely terrifying.
Yeah, because the stones are so big
And
What?
so old,
Yeah.
and the people like the willpower that was into move 'em.
Imagining
Right.
how anybody got that together is crazy.
Yeah, but he starts coming up with this whole idea about these druids who did it, because druids we mostly know about from Julius Caesar. One thing
And
they
Spaceballs.
yes,
Druidia.
the stones don't look Druish.
Yeah.
But yeah, Julius Caesar wrote about the druids when he invaded Britain. So he didn't write about, but he didn't write about Stonehenge. He said that the druids were going into oak groves.
So the Druids were around 2,000 years ago.
yes,
Okay. Got it.
so Stonehenge predates them.
Right.
And they are like later Celtic incursions that come into the area.
Oh, okay.
It might be some part of like the ancient Celtic religion. We like again, we don't really know.
They didn't leave any writing. And
Yeah,
there's
and
not
then
a
they
lot of
were
artifacts.
if they did, it's this script called Ogham, but that's a whole nother story.
Okay.
Anyway, they were tree worshippers, not stone worshippers, is
Oh.
the thing that we're fairly certain, at least from Julius Caesar. He's like, no, they worship trees. They go into sacred groves of oaks, and then when Rome was subjugating them, they burnt down their sacred groves.
Oh.
Right.
In Romans.
Yeah. But
That's
anyway,
not to say they couldn't have done stone things too.
yeah.
A person can have two interests. I mean, I don't know. I don't
That
think
time,
that
is that
necessarily.
economy? I don't know.
Yeah. well,
But anyway, his ideas about druids go on to spur the New Age neo-paganism movement, which
Right.
we've talked about before as being this idea of trying to like unify and create this like false cultural heritage to
Right,
legitimize. So
right.
at the time this is happening, it was like the British Empire is spreading. And so the British Empire is like, hey, we need to like really make ourselves seem even more important and unify
Let's create
the British Isles.
history.
Yeah, because the United
shared
Kingdom,
history.
the United Kingdom was finally the United Kingdom. So like, well, we have to like have this thing that unifies all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Oddly enough, that's probably not too far off from the original purpose of Stonehenge, as we'll find out. Other theories were that it was a healing center, that it had idea was that they were sending people to be healed there. This came from later after the Beaker people got there. They weren't cremating their remains; they were just burying people.
Okay.
And there's a guy who's like, well, there seems to be some health defects in some of these.
That would explain why there's a lot of bodies around there. Is It
Yeah.
was like a hospital.
Yeah, like they look at the
Okay.
healing energy.
Yeah.
There's also an idea that the blue stones have musical qualities.
Oh.
And I think they do have tonality because of the denseness of like the
So
dense.
like if you hit them with a
yeah,
hammer, it'll go.
yeah.
oing, oing, oing.
So denser the matter, the better like sound travels through it. You know, and so there is a long tradition of having like stone bells that are just stones that are getting hit.
Cool.
And a few of these blue stones might have gone missing to be repurposed as such in local churches.
Wow.
As well as being taken to be just used for building materials, of course.
Yeah.
But there might be some truth to that, that they had musical qualities, so it might have just been like a weird byproduct that wasn't intentional but could have been incorporated into it. It's like, yeah, you go to the ancestors, and if you hit on their gravestones, they sing to you.
That's cool.
You know?
Oh yeah, I like that.
But the blue stones were altered over time as well. When they were moved inside of the big circle, they were reshaped and chipped up a bit. So, you know, that effect, whether that was original or not, we don't know.
Those would be hard to chip too, because those are. Or no, I guess it was
sarsen stones are
heel,
tall-
The heel stone is that.
Yeah,
really,
yeah. The
really
sarsen
dense
stone
stuff.
is way harder,
Yeah.
but the blue stone is still dolerite, which is still really fucking hard.
Okay.
And dense. And then they got, you know, aliens, of course, have to make an appearance. Aliens.
When in doubt, it was Merlin and aliens.
And that's also because they are close to the site where crop circles began.
No.
Is in the same vicinity.
We're gonna do a crop circles episode
Yeah.
pretty soon.
And so that got tied to aliens because when in doubt, if humans couldn't have moved to aliens.
It's aliens.
Yeah, right, aliens.
Uh-huh.
That New Age movement continues into the, like it's really big in the 1970s.
Sure.
Up until like the late 70s, there were no restrictions on people just walking up to the stones,
I've heard that like you could like climb around on them.
and people were chipping pieces
Oh
off.
no!
And so, like, yeah, they look real fucked up and rough now, but they may not have been
they may not have been before
through
the 70s.
through weathering, and thousands of years of people chipping stuff off for building material and for souvenirs and stuff.
Right.
You know, so one theory that I really like and seems most likely for at least like the maybe phase 3 of it. So when it was then made into like the stone circle, like the sarsen stones are put there, the trilithons show up. Around that time, nearby is a place called Darrington Walls.
Okay.
And Darrington Walls, it appears to be a settlement. They have evidence of pit houses that could have housed up to 4,000 people. And they're finding huge quantities of pig bones and pig teeth. And from the archaeological evidence, it seems that these 4,000 people did not live here year round. They were seasonal. They showed up at one specific time of a year, and from the pig bones, they can tell the age of the pigs and even when these pigs were killed and consumed.
Wow.
Midwinter.
Oh.
So,
I was gonna guess midsummer because of the solstice, but
turns out that the solstice, the summer solstice, yes, it does line up, but it
Right.
also lines up with the winter solstice.
okay.
And that
it
might
must
have
line
been
up in a different way.
Yeah, it's sunset on the solstice, not sunrise. So it's
okay. So on
not
the
it's not midsummer sunrise. It's midwinter sunset that's important.
okay.
these people.
I wonder if that would line up with other things. I'd have to think about. I'm imagining in my head how that all works. 'Cause,
So
yeah, it must be some other thing lines up during that. That's interesting.
and what's more, these pigs are coming from all over Britain.
So
coming
they're
from-
having a big pig fair.
Yes,
it's like
they're coming
a
for-
regional pig fair.
They're coming from Scotland. They're coming from Wales. They're coming from some of the
It's
Scottish
a pig
islands.
convention.
They're all coming there from all over. They're bringing pigs.
A great big
they are
pig fair.
sacrificing pigs. There's so much pigs they're eating that they're not even like bothering to eat all the meat off the bones. There's like midden piles of these. Yeah.
My
so
God, it's a pig.
it's a big thing that's
Wow.
happening, and then they leave. It's possible that Darrington Walls settlement actually was at one point more year round while they were doing construction. So they lived
okay.
there during construction of phase 3.
Okay, this would have been phase 3. Got
Yeah.
it. Okay.
So they're living there while they're building it. But then once the construction is complete, it becomes a seasonal location
Got
that
it.
they're only coming to
Okay.
for this big midwinter festival of some kind. I mentioned earlier that it's this, they call it the sacred, that the whole area around there is some kind of sacred
sacred
scenery.
Landscape.
Landscape, thank
Yeah.
you. Sacred landscape. So there are sites that post-date Stonehenge that are there. There's some that predate it. There are others that we can definitively say are of the same time.
Okay.
So next to the Darrington Walls settlement is where Woodhenge was,
Right, you mentioned Woodhenge.
which is
okay.
like a mirror to Stonehenge but made out of wooden posts.
much easier to build.
Yes. So there's this theory now that's come to prominence that maybe wood's associated with life, stone is death. Because we know they're putting cremated humans there. It was a cemetery at one point. So it might be that
The Woodhenge might have been like a birthing center or something.
so you do this, like, you can follow a trail down that procession that traces out these sites starting at Woodhenge. It then comes to the river. You float down the river a bit, you pick up the trail again, and then it proceeds 2 miles to Stonehenge.
It's a metaphor for life.
Yes.
Wow.
This is like
the river of life.
a giant
the
ritual.
trail of life.
A giant ritual of people coming from all over the place to act out this like procession of life to death at the moment that the sun dies.
That's super cool. I like that.
And then that it
Yeah.
happens to line up with the midsummer solstice is also the sunrise. At that point, it's like, no, life triumphed over death.
Sure,
You
that
know?
could be read into it that way. I like this. That's a neat theory. Yeah.
But of course, this is all prehistory. It's not.
Yeah,
written-
this is just we're just
so,
guessing here.
You know,
yeah. That's a nice one though. I like it.
and I think a thing is that like people today, when they think about Stonehenge, they're too locked up in this modern worldview. Like, it's so alien to us, this other world and way of life where it's like, look, they're just starting out with agriculture.
It's so hard to imagine what it was like for the people who built it.
Yes, the idea that you
Yeah.
have people who also would be that unified in a task, the meaning of which you do not understand, but it
Yeah.
meant enough to them that they did it.
And that was a lot to organize and a lot of effort for some
Yes.
reason. Yeah.
Yeah, people can't think about it. They can't conceive that human power could make this happen.
Mm-hmm.
And because you don't know the meaning of it anymore, it's easier to just not think about it when it comes time to say, hey, let's steal some stones from it to repurpose for something else.
Yeah,
or
nobody
building
else
material.
is using it. We don't even know what they
yeah.
were doing with
yeah,
this.
Yeah, right. Doesn't
Yeah, maybe
mean
if we
anything.
knew more what it was about, they'd be
Yeah.
shown more reverence.
But yeah, some of those
Maybe.
stones have been relocated and returned to the site.
Oh, they were able to realize, oh, this stone way over
Yeah.
here, this was part of
Yeah.
Stonehenge. I read that in the 60s, they put one of them back.
Yes.
They, got a tractor and, popped it back into
yeah,
place.
and cemented it back in so it wasn't leaning. It was one of the trilothons, I think.
Okay.
And there was an earlier restoration that happened in the early 1900s too.
Ah.
They replaced some of the lintels, but some of the stones, yeah, they got repurposed, which is interesting because remember how I said those blue stones were quarried in Wales?
Yeah, a ways away.
There is evidence that some of them, not all of them, were actually part of an earlier stone circle in Wales
Oh, really?
before they were moved
So
to
the
there.
stone circle was stolen from the other one.
Or relocated, maybe the people were if it was all
Yeah.
if they are
Yeah.
already grave markers for your ancestors and these people are forced to migrate to a new
Oh,
area,
They might bring it with
they
them.
might bring it with them
Oh,
and
that's
then
interesting.
recreate and then keep adding to it
Right.
as more people keep dying.
Mhm,
That's maybe.
mhm, mhm.
That's a possibility. So yeah, Stonehenge in its life went through many phases. Different people used it for different reasons.
Yeah.
And like I said, they didn't have a written history, so we will never know everything. There's just too many components and missing pieces to the puzzle so we'll never be able to say,
This is what it was all
yeah,
about.
100% definitively, this is what Stonehenge
Well,
was for.
and as you
why.
pointed it out, it was around for so long and inherited by so many
Yeah.
people that it meant a lot of things.
Yes.
It probably went through many completely different meanings.
Yeah.
And it was added to, so it wasn't even the same henge from century to century.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no matter what I say, or anybody says this is what it's for, there's going to be people who disagree.
Sure.
There's people who still disagree that the stones were even carried there and that they were brought by glaciers and were called glacial erratics and that they were dropped there by glaciers, the blue stones, that is.
Uh-huh.
But we now know that the glaciers never came that far down.
So that seems unlikely.
Yeah,
Okay.
unlikely. So one last fun side story.
Okay.
And I said that there's an unlikely person who got involved in the mystery of Stonehenge.
Right.
And that is Charles Darwin.
Darwin.
Darwin got into the Stonehenge not because he really gave that much of a shit about giant Neolithic stone structures. It's because he was writing a book on worms.
Oh,
His-
like the evolution of natural selection
yeah,
of worms?
Darwin's secret passion in the end, near the end of his life was earthworms.
Wow.
And he got made fun of it and teased by other his peers. Dude, what's with you and the fucking worms? Right? And so he starts writing a book.
The Worm Book by Charles Darwin.
No, it has a really crazy name that's vegetable mold and the role of earthworms or something like that. But he came up with a theory that actually tends to hold up and be right. You ever wonder, why are archaeological sites all underground if they built them on the surface? It's yes, dirt blows in and piles up.
That's my understanding.
But why are they so far down sometimes?
I've always thought just over the course of time, everything sinks
And settles.
and I guess growing up in the trees,
Yeah,
you
stuff piles
just
up.
see stuff pile, and
yeah.
it's like, oh yeah, no, anything.
Yeah,
the older something is, the lower down.
So
in
in
the ground
both
it'll be.
those cases, though, there's the same mechanism at work. Here in the Santa Cruz Mountains, all
Yeah.
the leaf duff piles up and buries things.
Yeah,
Over time, that leaf duff is decomposed by worms and turned into dirt.
yeah, and then
Right?
that's new dirt.
Yes. But the same thing is happening beneath these things as well. Worms
Oh.
consume, besides vegetable matter and stuff, they're basically living little tubes. They're just living tunnels.
Yeah.
They will eat, how they
the
tunnel,
mouth on one end and the butt
and
on
how
the
they
other.
tunnel through the earth is they eat the dirt and shit it out behind them.
And that propels them forward.
And they extract all the nutrients from that dirt and move forward. Worm castings aren't compact, and now they've created all these little holes. So when water comes in and say you have something that weighs, I don't know, several tons above you, it starts to compress those worm casings. And sink
because the
in
worms
more.
are making little pockets.
Yes.
Where there's no more earth.
So some of the stones at Stonehenge, and he wrote specifically in Stonehenge was his example. He's like, there's stones that are still there. They've just fell over and then sank in through worm action.
The worms are making
Remember I said
everything sink.
Yeah, the heel stone had siblings. There were there were like 2 other stones with the heel stone that are now underground.
Thanks a lot, worms.
Wormholes.
Worms? It's the wormholes.
It was never aliens. It was wormholes the whole time.
It's the worms that do it. Wow.
Yeah.
Darwin was right yet again.
Darwin about
got it,
worms.
man.
Also, his grandfather was friends with what did I say that guy's name was?
Isaac Newton?
The guy that was friend with Isaac Newton.
Yeah, Isaac Newton's one friend.
Stuckley.
Stuckley,
yeah, and because Darwin didn't actually like come up with the idea of the tree of life. He just found out the mechanism for how it worked.
Oh, okay.
His own grandfather wrote a book about how he theorized everything was connected.
What?
Yes.
What? Really? I
Yes.
didn't know that.
Yeah.
So that wasn't even... I thought Darwin invented that on his own.
It was already like a family belief that he just like kind of
Wow.
rediscovered and then expounded on and then figured out the mechanism for how it worked.
That is remarkable. His grandfather would have been so proud.
Yeah, and his grandfather was hanging out with a dude who was also hanging out with Isaac Newton and
There you go.
working on Stonehenge. And then
Science
later,
people.
yeah, so it's kind of weird. It's like it's a family tradition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's crazy.
But worms.
The worms, man.
Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about Stonehenge?
I think all of the quarters of my henge have been exhausted.
And I barely scratched the surface. Like really, like okay, I watched maybe
You can't scratch the surface. It's a national monument, Cody.
Yes.
You're not allowed to touch that anymore.
I watched probably 7 separate documentaries. I read many
Oh
articles.
my gosh.
I went on lengthy wiki falls. I mean, I was like for over a week. I've been reading and consuming so much about Stonehenge
You
that,
do so much research.
that
for
last
this show.
night I dreamt about Stonehenge.
But all I think of is Stonehenge. I think about it when I dream. The biggest heads that I have ever seen. What's the purpose of Stonehenge?
Well, I have a question before we wrap
Yeah.
things up completely. When you do all this intense research for a show and then we record it,
Yeah.
it's the work's not quite done because we still have to edit it
Yes.
a bit. But like, does all that flush out of your head in the following days because you took all of your brain and you stuck the brain into the podcast and now it's offloaded?
I found that certain small details like specific names and dates kind of slip out, but
Yeah.
the broad stroke picture is
You have
still
a good
there.
memory. Yeah.
We haven't done a trivia night in a very long time, but yeah, I can pull it out. Where the point, like some of my notes this time largely were bullet points, just so I could like keep it on track. And
Well,
keep
and
the
I know,
story
yeah,
going.
you keep your notes more. You do your notes differently depending on the show.
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
noticed that, yeah.
and yeah. Did I say everything about Stonehenge? No. Did I like?
That'll never be the case.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
it'll take forever.
and as I was doing this research, even Allison was like, "Well, that doesn't seem very spooky related." And I'm like, "Well, you got the neo-paganism and the supernatural aspect, and people think about aliens and the mystery. You know, what's the mystery?"
I think this very neatly falls into the purview of this show.
All I know is that, like, in the 1990s, I had a Time Life book about aliens, and on the cover was an alien head juxtaposed over Stonehenge. So, yeah, I think they're connected in that way, culturally,
Sure.
or pop culturally, not,
Sure.
actually. I also used to think as a kid, when I was a teenager, I thought I'd be that asshole back in antiquity who would be like, "Hey, everybody, we're going to do this thing." And they'd be like, "What?" And they'd be like, "Well, why?
Why
Does
are
it
we
serve some
doing
kind of
this?"
purpose?" Like, no, it's purely to fuck with people in the future. Just to leave them guessing,
We're going to purposefully make this really complicated thing that seems to have a lot of meaning, but it doesn't. It's going to be the funniest thing when they try to figure it out.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe those people back then had a sense of humor like that. A whole
Oh, well,
culture
I mean,
of trolls.
We have to remember that even though technologically and scientifically they're not us,
Their brains are us. I mean,
yes.
yeah, they're
So, like,
human beings.
yeah, so they still have, like, senses of humor
Yeah,
and stuff.
possibly bad senses of humor where they spend a whole lifetime doing a joke that has no punchline.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't think that's really
Probably not.
No,
but...
it's totally everybody coming together to
yeah.
celebrate a
Sure.
thing.
But why not more than one thing? I don't know.
Also, another thing that backs that theory up, though,
Mm-hmm.
is that nearby there is an artificial hill
Oh.
that is, it's very close to Stonehenge. And that hill they thought was built in phases like Stonehenge. But recent analysis and core samples have proven that like it was continuously built over a period of like 200 years.
What?
And how it was done was seasonally people were showing up from the soil comes from all over Britain.
Wow.
And it is basketfuls at a time of soil from different parts of the island.
Whoa.
So
that's
maybe
neat.
when they were coming to that festival with the pigs, you didn't just bring your pigs.
You brought dirt.
You brought dirt from home.
Local dirt.
Dirt from home to contribute to that. Now, why and what the significance of it, there's some few theories that pertain
I
to water
know.
sources and idea of renewing life and stuff like that. But it just kind of like is interesting that
Well,
like
yeah,
the
I mean,
stones are coming from all over the place. The pigs are coming from all over the
even
place.
the dirt.
Even the dirt is being brought from all
Yeah,
over the
it's
place.
something about everybody getting together and then bringing part of their home there.
Yeah, and that
And
4,000 people are
sharing,
and that
right?
4,000 people are showing up in one place at one time around then is significant also because at that time
That's a lot of people.
that's like 4,000 people when the whole population of Great Britain is only in the tens of thousands.
Yeah, we're not even talking the size of a small city nowadays.
Yeah,
Spread out over the entire island, and yet they all know about it and they come.
yeah.
Word of mouth travels.
But why? We may
But why?
We'll never
For fun, to get
To
know-
party.
Yeah, to party. I mean, I think it's as simple as that. There's probably a lot of other reasons that.
Yeah,
but,
there's
but
like
in the end, people like to
yeah,
get together.
You get
But,
together,
know,
you probably come there to reestablish territorial boundaries
yeah,
and,
all
and
the
relationships.
The leaders will
trade
make
stuff.
sure that they're on board with each other and trade.
Yeah.
Probably was
yeah,
big.
yeah.
Everybody shares their dirt.
Yeah.
They all give each other pigs.
like the
and
precursor to Christmas.
Slaughter them. Yeah,
You know?
the pig slaughtering festival.
Yeah.
Precursor to Christmas.
The Hogfather.
yeah.
Okay.
So, do you want to list off all of our monster squadrons?
Oh, yes. Hold on. And you have to give me a second. I have to add another new one.
We've got another new one?
Yes.
So I have to do another Guards Quarter song with a new person?
Yeah. And,
Okay. I'm not doing that for this episode.
No.
That'll be the next one because I got to actually do a good job.
Okay. Patreon Monster Squadron producers.
Drum roll, please. That's me. Drum
Oh,
roll
our
on
last.
my belly.
I know you missed our last one, but our last meeting of the Monster Squadron was cool. We watched
yeah?
a movie. It was
What'd
fun.
you watch?
Last broadcast about the Jersey Devil.
How was it?
It was good.
All
Holds
right.
up.
There you go.
Held up better than I thought it did. And I now I now feel better about one of the criticisms that I've always had about this movie after talking about it with our Monster Squadron.
There you
So,
go. Okay.
yeah. Join the conversation.
Join
Come-
the conversation. Be part of the
Monster Squadron
fun.
wants you. You get a membership badge.
Join us at our virtual henge where we all gather more than once a year.
Come to my
to
Stonehenge.
to slaughter the pigs of indifference and share with the dirt of mutual love and acceptance.
Monster
Right.
Squadron. Travis Alexander, My Barbarian, Rachel Krieger, Tom Dahl, Justin Duckham.
Just him. I barely know him.
Kelly Flynn, Gunnar Franks, Carla Harrington, Havelock, Christina Hurley, our
Ooh.
newest Monster Squadron member,
Right on.
New Jared, Ken with 2 N's, Brian Lamb, TJ Levenhagen, Alicia Overton, Jordan Ramey, a different one but the same one, Blue Roan, Seti Fan, and Tatum.
Oh, wonderful. Good to hear of all of you and to see that our numbers are growing just a little every day.
Slowly but surely.
We're taking over
climbing
the
up.
podcast universe.
Yes. Let's see, things coming up. Oh, so we're going to have the Halloween special in 2 weeks from
Yep.
today when this releases.
Which you are spearheading.
Yes.
Mhm.
And then that night, so that's the 25th or 26th. Let me double check.
You guys
The 25th.
are doing Over the Garden Wall, right?
Yes, on the 25th.
I may drop into that when I get off of work, depending on how the timing goes.
Yeah, so the 25th of October at 7:30 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. We are going to have anybody's welcome to come on the Discord. You don't have to be a Monster Squadron person. Well, in general, just to be Discord, you don't have to be
Yeah,
Monster
that's
Squadron.
that. We should point that out.
But
yeah.
this time is also like, usually we only hang out on camera with them.
Yeah.
But this time is going to be like Everybody's welcome.
Free
and,
tool.
and we're going to do a movie night, and we're going to watch Over the Garden Wall.
Are you going to do the whole thing?
Yeah, it's only 100 minutes. It's like a movie.
Really? Every episode?
Yeah. It's 10 episodes at 10 minutes each. It's a
They are
miniseries.
that short, aren't
Yeah,
they?
they're that
That's
short.
crazy.
Yeah.
I always just do one episode a night and spread it out, and it takes a couple weeks to watch the whole
When it
thing.
originally aired, it aired 2 episodes per night over 5 days. And here's the crazy thing, Garth. The phases of the moon in the cartoon matched the phases of the moon in the real world
That's
during
so
that
cool.
week.
That's so cool. Attention to detail.
Yes. And we'll talk
All
more
right.
about that at the movie night. So come to that.
All right.
Um,
That's all the things as far as I know.
You can
But
send us-
You
you-
got more things than I do. Oh, yes, that's
you
right.
can send us mail.
22, P.O. Box 22, Redwood Estates, California, 95044.
Yes,
Hey,
exactly.
I got it.
You can also go to our Tumblr to see episode art and images.
The Tumblr gnome updates
yeah.
constantly.
Did you know there's visual aids to almost every episode?
That's
of the
right.
Least
I
Haunted
think there's
podcast?
a photo of me with Bill Nye from the last episode.
Yes,
I
and-
finally found it.
So you can go there and see various images that illustrate the points.
Certainly.
Blah 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 blah.
You
I
could
think
look
that's
up
good.
Stonehenges when you go to the Tumblers. Cool.
Cool. Okay, well, that's gonna do it. And yeah, until next time, the only thing that's haunted
Is you.
But the joke is only funny if it breaks your heart in two. Yeah, the joke is only funny if the whole world is laughing at you.
Say goodbye.
I do not, for one, think that the problem was that the band was down. I think that the problem may have been that there was a Stonehenge monument on the stage that was in danger of being crushed by a dwarf. All right? That tended to understate the hugeness of the object.
I really think you're just making a much too big a thing out of it.
Making a big thing out of it would have been a good idea.
The Least Haunted podcast is recorded before a dead studio audience and is a presentation of Sequoidea Productions, LLC.